11. 1970 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. Chevrolet wanted to prove that a small block engine could still deliver serious performance, and with the 1970 Camaro Z28, they absolutely nailed it. Under the hood was a 350 cubic inch V8 producing 290 horsepower at 6,000 revolutions per minute and 380 pound-feet of torque at 4,200 revolutions per minute. The engine featured a high compression ratio, solid lifters, and a 4-barrel carburetor, all designed to squeeze out as much performance as possible. Chevrolet actually developed this car with road racing in mind. The weight balance was excellent, with nearly equal front to rear distribution. The suspension was stiff, almost race car stiff, and that made the Z28 incredibly capable in corners. What really made the engine special was how high it could rev. It could spin all the way up to 7,000 revolutions per minute, which was extremely impressive for a muscle car of that era. And the sound, even before you saw it, you could tell a Z28 was coming. It had a raw, aggressive tone that made it impossible to ignore. Performance was just as impressive. The Z28 could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6 seconds, and the quarter mile took roughly 14.3 seconds. From the outside, the car looked relatively subtle. Just the Z28 badge and the dual exhaust tips gave away its true identity, but honestly, that understated look was exactly what people loved about it. Only 8,733 units were produced, and today the 1970 Z/28 has become a true collector's favorite. Number 10. 1964 Pontiac GTO. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the muscle car era truly began with the 1964 Pontiac GTO. At the time, General Motors had a strict policy that mid-size cars were not supposed to have large engines, but Pontiac's engineers decided to bend the rules a little. They secretly installed a 389 cubic inch V8 into the Pontiac Tempest and offered it as an optional performance package. The most exciting version featured tri-power carburation, meaning 3 2-barrel carburetors. That setup pushed the engine to 348 horsepower and 428 pound-feet of torque, which was an incredible amount of power for 1964. Performance was impressive as well. The GTO could reach 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.6 seconds, with a top speed of around 124 miles per hour, or roughly 200 kilometers per hour. The design looked just as powerful as the engine. It had dual headlights, a wide grille, and strong muscular body lines that made the car instantly recognizable. Inside, you got sporty bucket seats and a comfortable driving position, making it a car you could enjoy both on the street and on long drives. Pontiac originally thought selling 5,000 units would be a success. Instead, they sold over 32,000 cars in the very first year. That moment made Pontiac realize something important. Young drivers wanted fast cars. The GTO wasn't just another car, it was the beginning of a revolution. Number 9. 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner 446 pack. Plymouth had a very simple philosophy: cheap car, big engine, and almost no unnecessary extras. The Roadrunner was the perfect example of that idea. Under the hood was a massive 440 cubic inch V8 equipped with 3 2-barrel carburetors. Enthusiasts called it the 6-pack. The engine produced 390 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, which were incredible numbers for the time, and the price made it even more impressive. The Roadrunner cost around $3,900, while something like a Hemi Cuda was closer to $4,500. In other words, you were getting nearly the same performance for a lot less money. On the drag strip, the car could run the quarter mile in about 13.5 seconds, and it had a top speed of roughly 130 miles per hour. But the personality of the car was just as memorable as its performance. Plymouth actually based the car's identity on the Roadrunner cartoon character. The horn even made the famous beep beep sound, and the running bird logo appeared on the body. Young buyers absolutely loved it. Inside, the cabin was simple: basic seats, basic gauges, and not much else. Even things like air conditioning and a radio were optional extras. Plymouth spent the money where it mattered most: the engine. In 1969, about 33,000 Roadrunners were produced, but the 6-pack version was extremely rare, with only 1,960 cars built. Today, collectors pay anywhere between $80,000 and $150,000 for a good example, because when it comes to classic muscle cars, the Roadrunner 6-pack is a true legend. Number 8. 1967 Shelby GT500. Carroll Shelby took the Mustang and turned it into something completely different, a serious performance machine, and the 1967 Shelby GT500 was one of the most iconic versions. Under the hood was a 428 cubic inch V8, originally based on a heavy-duty heavy-duty engine used in police vehicles. Shelby's engineers modified it with an aluminum intake manifold, a larger carburetor, and a special exhaust system. Officially, the engine was rated at 355 horsepower, but many enthusiasts believe the real output was well over 400 horsepower. Performance was impressive for the era. The GT500 could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.2 seconds, run the quarter mile in roughly 14.5 seconds, and reach a top speed of around 134 miles per hour. And visually, the car looked just as aggressive as it performed. It featured a large hood scoop, bold air intakes, racing stripes, and Shelby Cobra badges throughout the car. There was no mistaking it for a regular Mustang. The suspension was also upgraded, and it came with front disc brakes, which were still relatively rare on Mustangs at the time. Handling was significantly better than the standard model. In 1967, only 2,050 GT500s were produced, which helps explain their value today. Clean examples now sell for between $150,000 and $300,000. But the GT500 was never just a fast Mustang. It was a product of Carroll Shelby's engineering genius, and one of the true icons of American performance culture. Number 7, 1971, Pontiac GTO The Judge. 1971 was basically the final chapter of the classic muscle car era. Emissions regulations were starting to tighten, insurance premiums were skyrocketing, and the golden age of big block performance was coming to an end. And right at that moment, the 1971 Pontiac GTO The Judge arrived as one last loud statement. Under the hood was a 455 cubic inch V8. The high output version was officially rated at 335 horsepower using the new SAE net rating system, which was more realistic than the old gross ratings. In reality, many experts believe the engine would have been well over 400 horsepower using the older measurement method. Visually, the Judge was impossible to miss. Bright colors like Orbit Orange, Cardinal Red, and Wild Purples bold the Judge decals, and a rear spoiler made sure everyone noticed it. Performance was still strong. The car could do 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.5 seconds and run the quarter mile in roughly 14.5 seconds. Not as brutal as earlier muscle cars, but still very respectable. Inside, you got sport bucket seats, colorful gauges, and options like radio and air conditioning, making it both fast and comfortable. The price was around $4,500, which was pretty expensive at the time. The result, only 374 Judge models were sold in 1971, and just 17 of them were convertibles. By 1972, the Judge name disappeared from Pontiac's lineup. The era was over, but the 1971 model remains a legend, one of the final battle cries of the muscle car age. Number 6, 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS LS6. This was the most powerful Chevelle ever built at the factory. The 1970 Chevelle SS with the LS6 engine is widely considered one of the most insane muscle cars of its time. Under the hood sat a 454 cubic inch big block V8, producing 450 horsepower at 5,600 revolutions per minute and 500 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 revolutions per minute. At the time, these were some of the highest factory power numbers in the entire muscle car world. The LS6 wasn't just big, it was built like a race engine. It had an 11.25 to 1 compression ratio, a Holley 4-barrel carburetor, forged aluminum pistons, and a solid lifter camshaft. This was basically race car engineering in a street-legal machine. Magazine tests back in the day recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 5.4 seconds, and the quarter mile in around 13.1 seconds at about 108 miles per hour. For 1970, those numbers were absolutely insane. Top speed could exceed 130 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest cars you could legally drive on American roads at the time. Visually, the Chevelle SS looked aggressive but not over the top. Black accents, dual exhausts, and SS badges were enough for enthusiasts to recognize what it was. The LS6 option cost an extra $263, which was quite a bit of money back then. Because of that, only about 4,475 LS6 Chevelle were built. Today, surviving examples are worth between $150,000 and $300,000. The engine continued into 1971, but compression dropped and power fell to 425 horsepower. That's why 1970 remains the peak year for the LS6 Chevelle. Number 5. 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1. If there's one word that defines the 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1, it's torque. Under the hood was a 455 cubic inch Stage 1 V8 producing 360 horsepower. But horsepower wasn't the real story here. The real headline was the torque figure. 510 pound-feet. 510 pound-feet of torque. At the time, that was one of the highest factory torque numbers in muscle car history, more than the Hemi Cuda and even more than the LS6 Chevelle. Magazine tests recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 5.5 seconds and a quarter mile around 13.4 seconds. The GSX was especially brutal in mid-range acceleration thanks to that massive torque. The GSX also had a very distinct look. It came in only two colors, Apollo White or Saturn Yellow, both paired with bold black stripes. It also had a rear spoiler and one of its most unusual features, a hood-mounted tachometer. Inside, the GSX delivered Buick's signature luxury. You had comfortable seats, high-quality materials, and plenty of options, proving that Buick could build a muscle car with real comfort. Production numbers were extremely low. In 1970, only 678 GSX models were built, 488 in white and 190 in yellow. That rarity explains why these cars are worth around $100,000 to $200,000 today. The GSX name disappeared after 1972, but the 1970 model remains the ultimate example of Buick's muscle car engineering. Number 4. 2020 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500. Now we move from classic muscle to modern American power. The 2020 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500 is easily one of the most extreme Mustangs ever built. Under the hood is a supercharged 5.2-liter V8, producing a massive 760 horsepower and 625 pound-feet of torque. When it launched, this made it the most powerful production Mustang in Ford's history. Performance numbers were incredible. The GT500 could hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 3.3 seconds, run the quarter mile in roughly 10.7 seconds, and reach a top speed of around 180 miles per hour, depending on the configuration. The car was packed with serious performance hardware. It featured a carbon fiber hood, advanced aerodynamic packages, track-tuned suspension, and a lightning-fast 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. This wasn't just a muscle car anymore, it was serious track technology. Inside, you still got modern comfort. Digital gauges, premium materials, and available Recaro racing seats meant you could enjoy both performance and everyday usability. The starting price was around $74,000, which wasn't cheap, but considering the performance, it was actually competitive. Cars like the Corvette Z06 or Porsche 911 Turbo offered similar performance at a much higher price point. Ford produced the GT500 from 2020 to 2022 before the new generation Mustang arrived, but this version made history, perfectly blending classic Shelby aggression with modern engineering. The GT500 proved that American muscle cars didn't just survive, they evolved. Number 3. 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda. The 426 Hemi engine is legendary. The 1970 Cuda body is iconic. Put them together and you get one of the most legendary muscle cars ever built. The 426 cubic inch Hemi V8 used dual 4-barrel carburetors and produced 425 horsepower at 5,000 revolutions per minute and 490 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 revolutions per minute. Because of its size and power, enthusiasts often nicknamed it the elephant engine. Visually, the Cuda looked aggressive from every angle. Wide rear fenders, muscular curves, and bold high-impact colors like plum crazy purple, vitamin C orange, lemon twist yellow, and sublime green made sure this car stood out anywhere. Performance was serious. Magazine tests recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 5.6 seconds, with a quarter mile around 13.5 seconds and a top speed well over 135 miles per hour. The base price was around $4,200, but the Hemi option alone added about $871, which was a huge jump back then. Insurance costs were also extremely high. Because of that, only 652 Hemi Cudas were built in 1970, and just 14 of them were convertibles. Today, these cars are incredibly valuable, often selling for $300,000 to $500,000, with some rare examples reaching well over $1 million. The Hemi Cuda wasn't just a fast car, it became a symbol of American performance culture culture and one of the holy grails for collectors. Number 2. 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. The 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona was built for one reason: dominate NASCAR. But to race it, Dodge had to sell a certain number of street versions, and that's how this wild machine ended up on public roads. The design was pure aerodynamic madness. The car featured a long, pointed nose cone that extended the front by about 18 inches, and a massive rear wing nearly 23 inches tall. Every detail was designed to improve airflow and stability at extreme speeds. The 426 Hemi version produced 425 horsepower, but the real magic came from the aerodynamics. Compared to a standard Charger, the Daytona had significantly less drag, making it dramatically faster on high-speed tracks. On NASCAR tracks, these cars broke the 200 miles per hour barrier, becoming some of the first stock cars to ever do it. The street version could reach around 155 miles per hour, which was unbelievable for the late 1960s. Only 503 units were produced, just enough to satisfy NASCAR's homologation rules. Most came in bright, eye-catching colors, making them impossible to ignore. At the time, many people thought the design was too extreme, and sales were disappointing, but over time, the Daytona became a legend. Today, clean examples are worth between $200,000 and $400,000. The Charger Daytona wasn't just a car, it was a bold statement of American engineering and racing ambition. Number 1. 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429. At the very top of the list sits a true icon, the 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429. This car was essentially Ford's racing engine stuffed into a Mustang. Under the hood sat the 429 cubic inch semi-Hemi V8 featuring massive cylinder heads, a huge aluminum intake manifold, and serious racing technology. Officially, the engine was rated at 375 horsepower, but most experts agree the real number was well over 500 horsepower. Ford intentionally underrated the engine for insurance and racing reasons. The engine was so large that it barely fit inside the Mustang's engine bay. In fact, the cars were sent to CarCraft, a specialty engineering company where each Mustang was heavily modified by hand to fit the giant engine. Suspension components were relocated and body panels were adjusted just to make it work. Because of the heavy engine, 0 to 60 miles per hour took around 7 seconds. But once it got moving, the Boss 429 was incredibly strong. Properly tuned examples could run the quarter mile in the low 13-second range. Production numbers were very limited. 859 units were built in 1969, followed by 499 more in 1970 for a total of 1,358 Boss 429 Mustangs. Today, these cars are highly collectible, often valued between $200,000 and $400,000. The Boss 429 wasn't just another Mustang, it was Ford's race-bred engineering unleashed on the street, and it remains one of the greatest muscle cars ever built.